Hola, mi gente bella. I am so happy to be here today with Ana Lopez. Hola, Ana. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm so happy. We've been trying to get together. I've been like, anyway, get over here. And life, the things, all las cosas, all the things. And I can't wait for us to have this conversation because I've been watching her online and I'm like, oh, I gotta get her on. We gotta get in here and talk about the deep stuff, the stuff that we don't talk about, the stuff that we need to talk about, and the stuff that I think gives us life. So before we go any further, I just want to read Anna's bio real quick. Y después empezamos. So, let me see, let me see. Acá tengo la bio. Ana Lopez is a proud Latina sexologist, certified sex and life coach, and smut consultant. I love that. She is the owner of Sex and Spanglish, whose mission is to provide culturally relevant sex ed that centers the individual and their personal desires and values while shifting the sex negative narratives that pose as a barrier to true guilt free pleasure. I mean, girl, I gotta ask the question, were you like this when you were a little girl? What were you already thinking about this? Were you like
Yeah.
who was humping her teddy bear? I know people are
Yeah, it was so funny. Okay, so
okay.
I love
My
people
mom
always
threw out
ask
my
me
first
on
boyfriend. That's what I say.
yeah.
My mom threw out my first boyfriend when she found out. So yeah, so tell me how it all started.
Yeah, so I always get this question. It sounds fake, honestly, but like it's true. So I was the little girl. So I have many siblings, but I was raised just myself and my older brother, who was 8 years older than me. So when I was five, he was what, like 13. And I was always like up his ass, essentially, like following him around, wanting to hang out with him and his friends. And so I don't remember exactly what they talked about. I just knew that like I had fun and they were nice to me, and that was that. But I imagine that that's kind of where I heard things that I probably wasn't supposed to hear. But anyways, I just remember that at 5 years old, there were these two little girls that lived across the street from me, and their dad lived across the street from me. So they would come like every other weekend to their dad's house, and they would come over and I had a swing set and we would hang out. But I remember I would tell them about sex, and I don't remember exactly what I said. It was probably totally inaccurate, but I would be talking to them about sex. And actually just last weekend I found a picture of them. I was like, because I was like, am I making this up? I'm like, no, that was them. I don't remember their names, but that I have a picture. So I had this idea that I wanted to be a sex ed teacher. And I think you see that kind of often in movies. And I really love education. I was always super into school and like teaching people things. And so I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And so all like elementary school, high school, I was like, yes, that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a teacher and I'm going to teach sex ed. But like in my mind, I was like, you have to be a health teacher to do that. And like not my thing. So when I got into college, I decided to go into psychology, as most people do who don't know what they want to do. And I was just like, I'm just going to go to psychology. I love the brain. Like I want to learn about the brain and how it functions and all of the things. And there was a human sexualities class that I wasn't even in, but everybody was like ranting and raving about the professor. And they're like, she's amazing. So I reached out to her and I was like, hey, can we talk? She's like, sure. So we had a conversation. She was like, you could do sex therapy. I was like, that's a thing. Sold. So I went ahead and finished my undergraduate degree, and I started looking to graduate programs. And I decided, because specifically I wanted to work with the Latino population. And I was like, that like marriage and family therapy is like kind of the way to go if I want to work with that demographic. Sure. Can I be an MFT and also work with that population? Yes, but also I'm multi-passionate. I feel like you feel me on this. I feel
Yeah.
like that's you as well. And so I was like, you know what, social work is very broad. So I'm just going to do social work and I'm going to become a licensed clinical social worker. And then I found a program that trains you to be a social worker, trains you to be a sex therapist at the same time.
I love
Sold.
that.
So I applied, I got in, all the things. It was great. And as I started going through it, I realized actually, I don't want to do therapy. Like, I love the conversational piece. I love talking to people. I love getting down to the nitty gritty, the why, all of the things. I don't want to diagnose you. I don't want to deal with insurance. I don't want to deal with a board. Like, the idea of having a board. So, for those of you that don't know, like, therapists have a board that they have to kind of, there are rules you have to abide by, and, like, different things that you have to do. And it makes sense, right? There's some type of like, it's regulated essentially, which is great. But for those of us that are not white, and anything other than basically like cisgendered and heterosexual and white, like there's a lot of red tape around that. And I didn't like that. The way that I talk to my clients would be seen as unprofessional. Sometimes the way that I dress would be seen as unprofessional. And if I can dress in a certain way and talk in a certain way and show up in a certain way that's going to get my clients better results, I would much rather do that than have to abide by these rules and regulations. And my ultimate goal was really to open my own practice anyway. And I was like, what is the point in opening my own business if I'm still going to have a boss, the board, telling me what to do? So I decided to forego, I did complete my social work degree. But I decided to forego sitting for the boards and I became a coach instead. And I'm obsessed. So that's where we are.
I love it. I love it. I love that story, but was it something that was merely curiosity, intellectual, or was it exploratory on your part? Because
Yeah. Um,
healing, but they like to observe it in others, which I don't know how they do that because I've done everything. I did my past life regression at 19. I've sat there in sweat lodge for 18 years. I don't
yeah.
just observe it. I live through the thing that then I share work with other people.
Yeah.
Like you've been exploratory, or has it been something just like more intellectual or heartfelt or spiritual for you?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. Like I always say that like I live, breathe, and eat sex. Like I'm obsessed with sex. And usually when I say that, people are like, oh, she just like really likes to have sex, which yes. But when I say like I'm like fascinated by all of the facets of sex. I'm fascinated by how people show up and how they connect in that way. And there's so much more to just like penis and vagina that we everybody talks about. Um and I'm just really fascinated by like all the facets, like even the things that I am not particularly interested in like participating in. I'm like fascinated by why ultimately like why people do the things that they do. And I've just taken like a turn into like sex and like how that shows up. And I'm a very like nuanced person, like a very like I love living in the gray area and like getting into the nitty-gritty. And so really seeing how like, well, how does like the way that you were raised, for example, so I work with a lot of Latinas, right? So like how was the way that you were raised outside of the sex conversation? How is that impacting you in the bedroom? Like let's connect the dots there. And it's very like holistic. I did a lot of like self-exploration as well and like a lot of healing in that area on my own that I think helped. But I think ultimately it's more of just like my curiosity of like, I want to know all the things.
Love that. I love that so, so much. What are some of the things that you see in clients who come to you specifically, like let's say Latinas, like
Mhm.
because I do hypnosis, so I've worked with people who have like sexual trauma or are having issues with fertility, or even like the baby hasn't turned around in the womb
Mhm.
reach. And sometimes they come to me and immediately I know there's sex abuse, there's something going on with the father of the baby. And when they work through it, sometimes the babies turn. So, what are some of the things you have found in your practice that you keep seeing over and over again?
Yeah, it's really, this is going to be like very general, but it literally is like every single person, men included, because I worked with men as well. I actually currently have some male clients, but it's really living in a way that's like they're, how do I explain it? It's really like defaulting to other people instead of themselves. So it's like if they want pleasure, if they want anything, you could insert any word here. It's really, I need something. So it looks a lot like consumerism. So it's like it could be buying a toy, it could be uh investing in like a program or something of that sort. I say that as like people pay to work with me, but right, but it's very much like getting more, like bringing more in instead of utilizing what they have. And really, and And so, yes, that is like things that you already have around the house, but also like, what do you already know? What do you already like? So, if we think about just like sex, a lot of people are like, oh, something's missing. I'm not quite sure what it is. So, let me go buy a toy. Let me go bring in a third or something like that. Or let's add in a new position or like want to do all of these things. And those things are not problematic. But rather than focusing on what's missing, let's focus on what's already working and just do more of that. And then if you want to add in other positions and all the other stuff, that's great. Let's do it. But it's really they're operating under the assumption that there's something that they don't have and they need that thing in order to experience pleasure. And that's absolutely not true.
I love that you just said that. And I was a little like surprised, but then I'm like, it makes so much sense because I see that like in the spiritual and healing world, everybody needs the retreat to Puerto Rico
Mhm.
or Santo Domingo or Costa Rica. And that's all really beautiful, but we can heal right here in our apartment.
Right.
You know what I'm saying, tend to the plant in your apartment. And and I love because I lead retreats, but it's also like the thing that you need that extra crystal, the crystal dildo or the crystal vibrator, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I love that you say that. What are some other things that come up with people that, that you're seeing in their sex lives?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of because we're not taught about sex, I think in general, and particularly like people of color and more, I mean, I can only experience talk to my experience as a Latina, like we don't talk about it. Um, because we are not talked about it. Geez. We are like looking for information, right? People are looking for information, which makes sense because there's actual like factual information that people do not have about sex, about their bodies, right? Like that makes sense. But then it turns into of like, how are we supposed to have sex? As if it's like a math problem or something, or like a specific like formula. And like, if you do like X, Y, and Z in this way, then this is how you're going to get to what people believe is the pinnacle of pleasure, which is orgasm. Um, that's not the pinnacle of pleasure, by the way, for anyone listening, but that's what is assumed, right? And so it's really just like, trying to do it like the quote unquote like right way in order to orgasm. And so they're missing out on all of the amazing things that happen up to orgasm and outside of orgasm. Um, so it's what is that phrase? Like they're missing the forest for the trees or missing the trees for the forest or something like that. That's essentially what they're doing
Wow, wow. What are some of the things? Do you still see that there's a lot of people who feel like sex is dirty or bad?
all the time. Yeah. And what's really fascinating about it is because it's like they have that belief, but then they don't at the same time. So they hold like a dual belief. So it's like the belief, it's usually the beliefs of like their parents or like maybe church or something of like sex is wrong or dirty or bad or something along those lines. But then they're like, if I were to outright ask them, is that what you believe? They would say no. But then when I have a conversation with them deeper, what they're telling me implies that they're still interpreting certain things as bad or wrong. And so it's like they hold both of those beliefs. And what I've noticed is that a lot of times it's like they almost don't want to let go of that this is bad or wrong because to them that means kind of like a separation from typically from their parents, but it could be any caregiver or church or what have you that they still like want to be associated with in some capacity. And I think we have this there's like this notion in society that like we can't say anything bad or that's in disagreement with something that we love as if that's like a requirement. And like what I teach my clients is really like you being able to tell something or say something about like a flaw that something that you love has, that is the highest form of love. If you're just letting them do whatever the hell that they want without thinking about the consequences, like that's not really like true love. And in my opinion, we see this a lot in like I don't say tangible things, but like non-people, right? So like with countries, for example, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about the United States, myself included, that are not like in agreement. And a lot of people are like, oh, that means that you don't like the states then. No, no one's saying that. But that doesn't mean I have to like every single thing about you. And the same goes for parents, caregivers, etc. Like we don't have to be in 100% agreement with them 100% of the time in order for us to have a loving, caring relationship, if that's what you even desire to have.
I love that. There's so much truth to that. The idea that we hold this, because I work in the subconscious realm of this subconscious belief or pattern or story, but then we're like, no, I don't believe it, but yet it's still seeping through because it's like the invisible lens from which we see everything. And that there's a sense of loyalty or of wanting to stay connected to our people, nuestra gente, el mundo donde venimos, our church or whatever it is, to tradition, um, and how really to really love someone and to love ourselves means being authentically in the holism of the whole thing, right? Like we're not just one thing, we're multidimensional, and being able to say, well, I love this country and it could be better, right?
Mhm.
Hey, I love myself and I think I should start walking more. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or I need more water, I need more sleep. Like these are not, I think it's a very black and white thinking.
Mhm.
I think that at some point, black and white thinking maybe helped us survive like
Yeah.
our ancestors. And now, as you said, you like to live in the gray areas, right? In those liminal spaces. And it's true because there's so much to it. So I guess giving permission to everyone, we can talk about things even though we love them. Yay. I
Yeah.
love it so much. What is something that you feel that people want and they're having difficulty getting?
I
Like in
think pleasure. Like, and what's so fascinating about this is that I think it's because a vast majority of people are thinking about pleasure in the wrong way, or in a very limiting way, I should say. We've associate anytime I say pleasure, before I even say what I do, I could just meet someone on the street, and if I mentioned the word pleasure, they automatically connect it to sex. But like you can like I can experience pleasure in this conversation with you. Like I can experience pleasure eating. I always talk about Casablanca, which is like my favorite taqueria down the street. Like I experience pleasure eating those tacos, right? Like I experience pleasure doing so many things. And pleasure is essentially enjoyment. So like what do you enjoy and tapping into that? And again, this goes back to like this like mass consumerism kind of thing is like the best way I can describe it. That's like we need the things to be happy. And like sure we might want the things and that's great, but we are often preventing ourselves from enjoying things and experiencing like pleasure and enjoyment because we're like, oh, I need the retreat, I need the toy, I need the partner, I need the experience, what have you. Um, and it's really just like we just need to tap into what pleasure, enjoyment feels like for us, and like we create that, and we're in this I don't even say era, maybe like we're in this era, I guess, of really like defaulting it or like abdicating it to other people. Like it's other people's responsibility to make us feel good. And actually, that's so disempowering because then what happens when they're gone? Well, now you're miserable, right? So it's like, how can you take back that ownership of like, no, like I actually create this. And yes, I want you here, but also you're just like, I don't know, the cherry on top.
I love that so much that you're saying that for everyone because I've had disagreements with like people in my life and friends in the past because I think because I saw so much dysfunction in my parents' relationship that just as a child I learned to soothe myself with painting and
Mhm.
singing and creative arts. And I realize over time, like no one can take this from me,
Yeah.
right? Be bad days and there's nights where we don't sleep because people have been yelling and whatnot, things are happening. But I can get up in the morning and still sit down and draw or talk to God or whatever the things that I do.
Mhm.
I've always been like that where there's this thing where I'm like, you build a life where the other person's the cherry on top. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You
Yeah.
build a life that, yes, if they're gone, you will maybe fall on the ground and be upset for the dreams that you had and what you invested.
Yeah.
But you also build a life, and I didn't call it pleasure before. So thank you for giving it that. I was calling it joy, which is similar.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, sometimes people see it as selfish.
Yeah.
I've been like, oh, you're gonna go do that. I used to belly dance. So I used to dance 10 hours a week, but I worked like a job
Uh,
and my in business. And people are gonna go belly dance again. You're gonna go belly dance again. I'm like, well, I'm not drinking. I'm not drugging. I'm just letting,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm happy. Um, but that's something that my soul so needs in order to exist on earth.
Yeah.
You know,
What's so fat? Oh, go ahead.
have you found that sometimes people get like upset or mad, or maybe people have talked to you about it, your clients, that people have called them selfish, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, which is exactly what I was going to say. So I'm glad I'm
Yeah.
glad you asked. Yeah. So what's so fascinating about it is because if we just think about the definition of the word selfish, like you just like going to dance, like you were spending time with yourself. So in some capacity, like yes, it was selfish, like by the definition. I don't think selfish is like bad or wrong or negative. Like we do need to tend to ourselves. We do so when we eat, when we shower, when we drink a glass of water, right? Like we tend to ourselves all the time. And that's really being selfish. It's just really focused on self. But it has such this like it has such a like negative connotation, and I think particularly for those of us that have been socialized as women, right? You never hear a man being called very rarely do you hear a man being called selfish because he's like, I'm just gonna use an example, like my partner plays pool in the garage with his friends. I'm not like, oh, you're so selfish, you're, you know what I mean? Like that's weird. But if that was me, like he wouldn't call me that, but maybe other people would, right? um and so it's really like this idea that like women are like quote unquote supposed to come last, right? Like everybody else's needs come first. And I understand that that can be, we got a lot going on, like, especially in today's day and age, like the vast majority of us work maybe multiple jobs, kids, housework. There's a lot of things to do in the 24 hours that we have every single day. And I get it, it's a lot. And so when we make that decision to care for ourselves, it can seem like we're like ditching our family, right? And I would say, at least in my experience, in the people that I'm around, we also want to spend time with our families and nurture them and all of the things. And as someone who spent like years taking care of her grandmother, what I learned was that the more that I take care of myself, the more that I can give to others. So really, I reframed it as I'm taking care of myself so that I can take care of my grandmother. Because if I don't care for myself, then I can't care for her. Like she's just going to get the shit end of the stick, right? Like in the same way, if anyone is listening that has kids or is caring for anybody else or is just in a partnership of some kind, you have a dog, right? Like the same thing. Like if you are noticing that you're constantly like zoning out when they're trying to talk to you, you're annoyed by them just breathing, right? You're short with them, whatever. That is likely because you're not being quote unquote selfish. And if you were selfish, it would actually help you show up even better for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, it's like the reason that it is something that we say all the time that you have to, what is it? You have to give yourself the oxygen on the plane, or
Mm-hmm.
have to fill your cup, or you have to like charge your batteries. And that's one of the things that I think drove me to improv, because I was like, I've been working from home before anybody. Like all of the Latinas that I see online, none of them were out there when I was in 2012. 2012 I started. There was no Zoom. So to teach a class, it was conference calls, and I
Mm-hmm.
was on my first year. So I've been on here a long time making this is what I do for a living, right? So the pressure of staying relevant, of staying up to date, of learning the technology, of hiring the people. I had 12 like years of part-time assistant. If I don't go to belly dance, if I don't go sing in a band, and I don't have kids, right? If I don't go do things that fill me, I don't know that I would be so in love with what I do after
Mm-hmm.
25 years of doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because you said, if you're phasing out, if you're this, if you're annoyed with how they breathe, if your work doesn't satisfy you anymore, if the thing that you loved is like, right?
Yeah.
It's a sign that we're just not getting enough, just self pleasure, the way you call it, or joy. So I
Yeah.
love it so, so much. I have a question for you. And I asked everybody this because I love this question, but what ancestral pattern or ancestral belief did you have to like heal or work through in order to be fully yourself today and do the work that you do?
Yeah. I think I love that this question just came after like what we were just talking about because I was thinking about that. And I really think it was like being able to show up for others, because that's just kind of like naturally who I am. Like, I am someone who wants to take care of her parents and her grandparents that are still alive, right? And like be there for my friends and family in that way when I can. And it was really about like doing that while also not showing myself up. Showing up for myself. Why can I not say this? Putting myself on the back burner, right? Really just like being able to show up for them. And for me, it's not either or, it's a yes and I think that that was the thing of figuring out like, no, I want both of these things to be true. How can I figure out to make it work for me?
I love that so much, so much. I know because I saw my grandmothers and my mother like give up so many opportunities and things.
Mhm.
They were taking care of family, right? And of course, there are, I think, moments where we do have to sacrifice because it's just
Yeah.
life. So I've pulled back and taken care of my mom when she was ill before she,
Mhm.
and I haven't lived next to my family since I'm 21, by the way. So I
Mhm.
have to travel, go stay there. But it's like those are moments, but they shouldn't be the way you're living your life every day, like sacrifice.
Right.
So what are some of the ancestral gifts you're leaning into doing all the work that you do?
Yeah, I think it's like tied into that, right? Like the nurturing, but redefining like what that looks like, and really owning that as like a choice. Like, I am doing this because I like to do it. The example that I always give is that like I learned to cook like kind of late in life, I would say, and I really enjoy cooking, and I enjoy cooking for my partner. It's just him and I at home, and like I enjoy like making the meal, whatever it is, and like serving him his plate, and like I really like that time when it's just him and I. And I think that a lot of my clients have this like, oh, but like that's so like not feminist and like all of that. I'm like, no, feminism is about choice. And so I really want to like, I'm owning that. Like, I want to do it. I'm not doing it because I have to. Like yesterday, where did we even eat? I don't know. Wherever we ate, we ate out is the point, right? But it's like, it's an enjoyable experience because I'm owning it and I'm really leaning into that.
I love that so much. And we don't realize that we're actually taking away women's choices when we are judging them for cleaning
Mhm.
or cooking or doing something that they love to do.
Yeah.
Um, it's only just when we're forced or we're told that's the only thing we can do or that we have to do it and do it now.
Hmm.
Love that so much. And it's so interesting that the thing you had to heal from is also the part of the gift, right? It's like
Right.
the gift, gone wrong or the gift like pushed to the extremity. Um,
Yeah.
how, if people wanted to work with you, what are some ways that people could work with you? What are the offerings that you're offering these days?
Yeah, so I'm currently doing one-on-one coaching. And so that's just like in a one-on-one format. I do video coaching and I also do text-based coaching, which I absolutely adore, especially those of us that have super busy schedules. And so yeah, I have both of those open right now. And I also have an online course called Operation Orgasm, that is available. So yeah.
I love that. How did that course come about? Like, how did it come about?
Yeah, so there are really just concepts that I was talking about over and over again in my coaching. And I was like, you know what? Like, this just needs to be a course, like, really almost like the foundation. So it covers everything that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand. And really, what on demand means is that you're not looking outside of you, right? So your partner can be having a horrible time, or he's in a mood, or they're in a mood, whatever. But like, you are really like almost like taking the not almost, you are taking the responsibility for your own pleasure. And so the three things that you need to do are three pillars that are covered in Operation Orgasm, which is creating an understanding of your body, learning how to effectively communicate that both to your partner and even to like medical professionals that you may be working with. And then the skills of rest and rejuvenation. Those are really like the only things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand and take responsibility of your pleasure.
I love that so, so much. And where can we find you if people want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so I am on pretty much all the socials. I mainly live on Instagram and TikTok, but I'm also on Facebook as well. Sex in Spanglish, so it's Spanglish, not Spanish. You can send me an email at anna@sexandspanglish.com. My DMs are always open. I promise I don't bite. So feel free to ask me any questions that you have about anything that I've said here or anything that's preventing you from enjoying sex.
I love that. And before we close, is there any message on your heart or anything that just comes to mind that you want to leave our people with, nuestra gente? Just a message for them, anything?
Yeah. I would say that like any pleasure that you've ever experienced like comes from you. There may have been other people present, so whether that was a partner or someone else, but I really encourage you all to think back to a moment where you were experiencing like immense pleasure or enjoyment and try to think about how it was that you actually created that for yourself rather than crediting other people for it.
I love that. Me encanta. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank you.
course.
Please follow her. Just reach out and, maybe take the course because pleasure is important, sex is important, and taking our pleasure back is key, right? I think for a good life. So, muchas gracias, Ana. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.